Do you have pain, fatigue, or other physical symptoms when you move, are in certain positions, do certain activities, eat certain foods? If you do, this is the video for you, because I'm going to go through 6 ways you can break conditioned responses. Our brain helps us adapt and survive by making associations, links between certain conditions and certain outcomes. And it's not that complicated. The brain repeats what's good, what feels nice, and it tries to avoid what does not feel good, which does not feel nice. The problem with this is our brain makes mistaken conditioned responses. It makes mistakes when linking a condition and an outcome. And this affects us when it comes to our chronic pain or chronic symptoms. Anyone who's had chronic pain or chronic symptoms, a lot of times what will take place is your pain or physical symptom becomes linked with a neutral, safe trigger. This could be positions, movement, activity, time of day, days of the week, weather, smells, sounds. And what happens is these safe triggers are not what's triggering the pain or your physical symptom. A lot of times they are not actually triggering anything. What's happened is your brain has just interpreted that those conditions are potentially dangerous. So it's not that the condition is actually damaging or hurting your body in any way. Your brain is just linked, this condition is dangerous, and it will click on pain or physical symptoms as a result. And when we're healing from neuroplastic pain and symptoms, we need to break these conditioned responses in order for us to fully heal. What happens when we have chronic pain and symptoms is we fall into taking danger steps that actually worsen our chronic pain and symptoms. So if you look at this slide, number 1, you experience pain and symptoms. Then number 2, you start to avoid certain activities or conditions in an effort to decrease the actual symptoms taking place. Then third, the brain becomes afraid and believes it really needs to protect us. And finally, number 4, an increased sense of danger and nervous system dysregulation take place as a result. And this whole cycle just keeps going. It will then increase your pain and symptoms and onward. And I've seen people caught in this cycle for many, many years, not knowing how to break out. But there is a way to break out of these danger steps. So let's look at the safety steps. Number 1, you start to identify and slowly approach what we feared. So you start to approach the condition, whether it's movement, position, activities, whatever it might be. Number 2, you use safety messages and nervous system skills to start to foster a sense of safety as you approach those conditions. Number 3, the pain and symptoms are tolerable as you get this exposure. So you don't want to push too hard with approaching the conditions. It is going to trigger some symptoms, but you're using all those messages of safety and nervous system skills to foster safety and tolerate the pain and symptoms as you do this to cultivate that felt sense of safety. And number 4, the brain starts to realize it's actually safe. These conditions aren't dangerous. And then we're ready for the next step. As the brain starts to realize this, we might even start to get some decreases in pain and symptoms. And then we repeat the process. We start to approach even more. So these essentially are the safety steps that we want to utilize while we're breaking our conditioned responses. So in my approach, the somatic safety method, we use 6 strategies to break conditioned responses. And in our detailed digital course, we go through this in depth. So if you haven't joined yet, the link is down below. Be sure to check out what's included in the course. It might be a great fit for you. But in the somatic safety method, we have 6 strategies for breaking conditioned responses. Let's go through them. Number 1, look for exceptions. Exceptions help us feel physically safe to approach the condition we once feared. See, exceptions occur when your pain or physical symptoms, they're not behaving the way structural or systemic symptoms typically behave. And so, for example, let's use the example of walking. Maybe you have an exception where there's a few times you walked and it didn't trigger back pain. That would be an exception to the rule that walking is damaging your body and triggering pain. So looking for exceptions are really vital. It sometimes isn't that clear. Sometimes it's just the level of sensation. If something's structurally going on, it's going to be very consistent. You're not going to have exceptions. So if walking equals back pain, walking is going to almost always equal back pain to a very similar level. But if sometimes you have pain when walking, sometimes you have less pain, this is great evidence. Now, one of my big exceptions when I was first healing, because I did have pretty debilitating hip and back pain while walking. But I remember I had an interview at a university and for a job. And I don't know what I did in this interview, but I killed it. It was probably the best interview I will do in my entire life. And afterwards, I was so elated. I was so excited about the fact that I got this interview. It went so well that I walked around for about 25 minutes and didn't have pain. That was one of the first big exceptions that taught me, hey, walking doesn't actually trigger back or hip pain. When I'm in a good mood and I'm enjoying myself, all of a sudden I'm completely fine. And so that's a pretty big exception, but you're looking for this throughout your history, whether it's in the past or now that you've watched this video, start to look out for those exceptions, because this is the first strategy for actually breaking those conditioned responses, because it teaches our brain, hey, I'm actually okay. Number 2, specific safety messages. Keyword here, specific. I've talked lots about safety messages on this channel. These are cognitive messages of safety that you can give yourself in order to understand that your body's okay and you're physically safe. Now, these safety messages are going to vary person to person, but when we have a conditioned response, we'll use the example of walking and back and hip pain for myself. When you have that conditioned response, your brain has a deep belief. It has a deep unconscious belief that walking equals pain or physical symptoms. And this can happen unconsciously. You don't even need to be thinking about it because your brain has made such a deep association between the two and such a deep fear about that condition. And so we want to use specific safety messages. Later in this process, we're going to start to approach the conditions as we talked about. But during that, you want to specifically be reminding your brain, hey, this is a conditioned response. This is a great time to remind yourself of your exceptions. These exceptions to the rule where, that one time I walked and there was barely no pain. You want to remind yourself of that as you're going throughout this. So you want to be very specific and remind your brain just repetitively over and over again, this is a conditioned response. I'm actually physically safe. So here's some examples of specific safety messages. My own example, I know walking doesn't actually damage my body. My brain has just mistakenly learned walking equals pain. I am safe to engage in this movement. You could have other examples, such as sitting at work is completely safe. I'm experiencing pain right now because of a conditioned response. I know this is true because I can sit at home and have no pain. Or being social doesn't actually physically trigger dizziness or fatigue. My brain has just accidentally labeled being social as dangerous. Last month, when I was having fun with my friends, my dizziness and fatigue was really low. I can retrain my brain. Number 3, nervous system regulation. This is key. We want to feel in a regulated, connected, safe state as we engage in the conditioned responses and start to break them. This is vital, and I want to be clear, it's okay to have a bit of a blend. You can have some sympathetic fight or flight energy, or even some dorsal vagal shutdown despair energy. Some of that is okay to have, but you want to have that ventral vagal, which is where you feel safe, calm, connected, at ease. You want to still have a foot in that safety and connection. And so I have a video, 7 steps to regulating the nervous system. I'll link it to the top and down below. Be sure to check that out. That's a really vital video to start to dive into and create nervous system regulation. Now, when I was starting to approach walking, and for you all know now, I'm able to walk. I can walk 3 hours and I don't have back pain. And so as I started to slowly do the graded exposure, I mean, it was maybe a minute or two at first of walking. Before that, I would do a bunch of breath work. I would do breath work for, 10 to 20 minutes, get in this really at ease, light, regulated place, and then approach starting to break the conditioned response. Again, your only job is to cultivate a felt sense of safety in your body as you approach the conditioned response. And it's not going to be perfect. Like I said, there is going to be some fight, flight, freeze, shutdown energy associated. Your brain has interpreted these conditions as really dangerous for really long, but we want to start that process of starting to break that. And we do that by keeping nervous system regulation in mind as we break the conditioned responses. Number 4, visualization, somatic tracking. Actually approaching the condition that you feared can be so scary. Like when I was first approaching walking, it was terrifying. I was just terrified I was going to get a pain flare. And for any condition that you're approaching, it can feel really scary and unapproachable. So a starting place is visualization, somatic tracking. In my course, The Somatic Safety Method, we detail an outline process on this and go through a practice that we offer everyone. But visualization, somatic tracking is where you start to visualize approaching the conditioned response. So for myself, I started to visualize actually walking. And at first, this would even trigger pain. So if you're doing a visualization of your conditioned responses and it triggers pain or symptoms, you're never going to get better evidence that your symptoms are neuroplastic because nothing's physically changed. And it's so clear that the association is taking place. So there's an added benefit with visualization, somatic tracking, that you get more evidence. But I would visualize it, and then I would process any pain or symptoms that came up using somatic tracking. I would process my emotions and attend to them somatically, breathe, regulate, and once I felt more regulated, I would start to visualize again. I did this a lot when I was first healing because for myself, my chronic pain left me debilitated. I barely moved. I barely did anything. And so I needed to start to break that, and visualization, somatic tracking was a great first step for me. And this is something I use with almost every single client because it's vital for breaking conditioned responses. Number 5, graded exposure and somatic tracking. Ooh, we're diving in deep now. This is where it all comes together. To actually break conditioned responses, you are not going to heal by just avoiding. You're also not going to heal by approaching way too intensely. So I see people do one of two different things. Either they push through their pain or symptoms and force themselves to do the conditioned response, which is going to end up in a lot of dysregulation and flares. Really don't suggest it. And then there's other people that avoid doing it at all costs. They don't want to approach their condition. They want to keep their world small and minimize conditioned responses. As we start to approach, shades of gray here, people. We need to do this gently, lightly, compassionately. Start to actually engage in the conditioned response while doing somatic tracking. In our course, I really break this down with clients. We go through some practices to support people. And when I'm working with clients, I do a lot of this. So for example, when I was walking, I would walk for 1 to 3 minutes, and then I would sit and I would regulate. I would do somatic tracking, process it in depth, and then when I felt more safe, I would get up and I would walk 1 to 3 minutes again. That's where I started. And eventually it took off. It took me about 4 months to go from barely moving my body to being able to fully move my body, fully work out, do whatever I wanted. So that progress, 4 months isn't that long. It is very possible for you to start to break these conditioned responses and live this full life. And graded exposure and somatic tracking are really vital elements in doing this. And finally, number 6, pleasant and rewarding. Your only job, again, when you're breaking your conditioned responses is to teach your brain that you are safe and it is okay. And that's a hard job to do. So I call this pairing with pleasant. You're trying to positively reinforce to the brain that this condition is safe. So you could pair your condition with your favorite music, doing it at your favorite time of day, doing it when you're in a good mood, listening to your favorite podcast. It could be watching a TV show. Whatever it is that puts you in that laid back, light, easy place, you want to pair that with your condition. So when I was walking at first, I had this super happy, laid back playlist I would listen to. I'd walk in my favorite nature area, and I was teaching my brain, hey, we're actually safe. So pairing with pleasant is really essential. I've seen this work time and time again with people. Now, the other side of this is the reward that comes from it. Naturally, this works hard, but it can be very rewarding. It can give us so much back in our life. So all of a sudden, when I could walk 20 minutes, it started to perpetuate itself because I felt so much freedom and ease with the work, even though it was hard. And then getting to 30 minutes wasn't that much longer. Like, it started to take off. So remember this, pleasant and rewarding. We're trying to cultivate pleasant sensations and experiences to the condition to teach your brain that you're safe. So I hope this video was helpful. Please put your questions or comments down below. Hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and I'll talk to you all soon. Take care.